Hi, everyone, and welcome to our second episode of Brews Bytes, where we're going to be talking about economical storage. I have two great guests with me. First, from Caringo is Ryan Meek, and I also have TC, the CEO of StorageDNA. So why don't we start with some introductions? Actually, I forgot to get some of the housekeeping stuff off the table first. Sorry, no introductions yet, guys. Hold on. But we have a lot of great resources attached to this broadcast. So if you take a look in your window there to your right, the little toolbox that you have, we have lots of good attachments. We have a link to the StorageDNA site where you can learn more. And of course, you can always go to caringo.com in the webinar section. Okay, and now it's time for the introduction. Sorry, guys, had to get that off the table. Sure. So let's let the guests go first. So TC, why don't you go first? Tell the viewers who you are, where you came from, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm TC. So firstly, thank you guys for having me on this. I'm the CEO of StorageDNA, and way back, I would say I started off at Carnegie Mellon, did my bachelor's, master's computer science, went to Panasys, file systems, quantum, and then we've started StorageDNA. And I think our real background and legacy in the media market has been building LTO and LTFS archive middleware solutions. We've done that for a few years, and the past few years we're seeing definitely a change of trend, and we're seeing it. And I don't think we're seeing that LTO is going away. Right? I think clients want to use LTO. It's still the most cost-effective storage. But I think users have a lot more options, right? And they're looking at different ways to put their data on different kinds of storage tiers, and it's our job to assist them. So we're kind of branching out of LTO, LTFS, and supporting more storage platforms, and that's sort of where we are at today. So,
okay, Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm the principal solutions architect here at Caringo, and I bring a view a little more from the development perspective. One of the things we did is that, we said whether storage is on HTTP. And so that really starts with HTTP and REST APIs. I did computer science and economics at the University of Texas, and then ended up as a developer primarily in startups until I landed at Caringo. And then it's been development, testing, training, working with customers, implementing solutions. So I kind of come straight from the ones and zeros, I think.
So that some of the best developers I've met are actually didn't come from computer science, to be honest with you. So
yeah, well, I started in economics, and then I had been programming when I was a kid. And then when I graduated with a liberal arts degree, I quickly thought, this programming thing might have something going for it. So I actually did some work in computer science, and then so here I am.
Cool.
Well, we're economics. We expect some great definitions from you coming up.
Oh, yeah.
But first, we forgot, this is Brews and Bytes, so we have to show our brew. Again, I have my
I'm excited. So yeah, I need to get a new one.
So yeah, we invite our viewers and our presenters to always have a brew, tea or water or an adult beverage. No one needs to know what you're drinking. I think they may be able to tell. That brings us to our first question. I mean, You're an economics major, Ryan, so maybe we start with you. Define economical in your own words. We talk about economical storage. We're also talking about data insight, data migration, that kind of whole workflow. But how do you define just the word economical, and how does it apply to the storage world?
I mean, economical is pretty broad, right? I tend to think of it as the lowest cost-effective solution. It's not, what's the lowest cost solution you can get. That sometimes could just be the worst solution. So it's really the idea of storage plus being cost effective for what you want to get done. If what you want to get done is active archive, and you want thumbnails or pictures to load, you want 20 or 30 or 100 of them to load on a browser before a user goes away, you're looking at latency to the first byte. If you're talking about long-term archives for national archives, in a museum, which, we've also done, we have experience, it's really don't lose the data, very strong data protection, very strong really even getting into compliance feature sets of, this is really the data it was when it was stored. And then, for very large amounts of data in that case, it could even be important that you have power saving features like disk spin down. So there's a lot of components to it. There's also the human component, which may be commercial software that's packaged and bought versus do-it-yourself open source. So there's different dimensions, but I just tend to think of it as the lowest cost-effective approach for a particular use case or for a particular set of data or users.
Yeah, and TC, how would you define it? I mean, I think you guys look at it from a broader viewpoint than Caringo. Obviously, I think you have insight into a lot more than just archival storage, the entire storage environment. So how would you define economical, not necessarily even towards the storage layer, but just the entire kind of IT layer?
Yeah. No, I think what we've noticed is, if you kind of go back 10 years, the conversations, if you said economical storage, it would just be LTO, right? There was primary high performance storage, and then there was LTO, right? And I think that conversation is changing. So if you say what is economical storage today, I would say it's everything other than your primary storage, right? So now we're talking nearline disk, we're talking object, we're talking LTO, we're talking cloud, we're talking multiple buckets in the cloud, S3, Azure. It's pretty crazy, right? So, and I think the conversations now are, hey, we need every piece of data living on an economical storage tier right away, right? So I don't think it's about what you put on economical storage. I think everything is going to economical storage, and it's what you delete from primary storage, right? So to me, I think economical storage as of today, as Ryan was saying, has a bunch of facets to it, right? Is it going to be used just, you're going to put it on a shelf, never use it? Well, that's happening rarely, right? And I think the conversations more about economical storage are about, okay, cost is important to me, but so is access, right? So it's a weighted average of cost and access, which I think people are most interested in going forward, right? And then let's not forget about things like migrating it, cost of maintaining it, which is also starting to play a very interesting role, right? So I would say, economical storage is a lot more and a lot wider than what it used to be as a definition. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned access, you mentioned effort, in addition to cost. I mean, which one do you think is the most important? I understand you're going to say it depends, as everyone else says it depends, but which one do you see one increasing in importance versus another? Because 10 years ago you said it was cost. There was no hands down, cost was the most important.
Right.
So today, which one of those characteristics is most important?
So let's kind of identify what's going on. Volume is going up, right, of data, and the need to do more with your data is going up. There are great services in terms of AI, in terms of logging, transcription, the ability to repurpose your data. So because of these services, the need for access is going up, right? So volume is going up, the need for accessibility is going up. And I think what that in general is resulting is, hey, my primary goal is all my data should be accessible, right? And then let's do it at the most cost-effective tier. So I would say actually access is starting to win out. And that's primarily the reason, because, let's face it, tape is still the most cost-effective storage. We still need to make one copy on tape. Nobody's disputing that, right? But why is the need coming up to make a secondary copy? And that's access, in our opinion. And as I said, and every piece of data needs accessibility now. So,
yep. Ryan, same
I would say that's
question.
that's especially true because of what you were saying about how people want to mine existing data for additional information. I mean, people have security videos and they're looking for patterns, or they're looking for anti-patterns. People have DNA data. If people have photographs and they're looking at metadata,
right.
AI engines are looking for deep patterns in a lot of cases, but you can't go looking for a tape for that for all that data to be there. So, we started out with this idea of what if you kept all of your data all of the time, and that's not economical for most people yet, but it feels like we're getting close, right? So then it's just a question of how to arrange it and then how to arrange access, again, in a cost-effective way.
Yeah, and there's inherent challenges with that, right? It's how do you determine what data needs to be accessed, and then how do you migrate it? I mean, that leads to the next question: is how do you determine what to move to economical storage? What have you seen out there? And then once you've determined these data sets, how do you do it efficiently? As you know, not everyone has a huge bandwidth pipe or access to fiber on the back end. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on. So TC, how do people determine what data sets to identify, and then once you do identify, how do you move them?
Yeah, so that's kind of the other aspect of where we feel there needs to be sort of a big change, right? So as we talk to clients and we've started having these conversations, we're definitely seeing this this tsunami or this growth in volume of data, right? We're also seeing that this data is being created across multiple locations, multiple storage platforms. Like we said, right, we just defined so many different kinds of economical storage, right? And people are using all of it. People are using cloud, multiple clouds. We talk about hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. And what started to really mentally boggle us was we would talk to a client and we would ask them, hey, do you know where your data is? Do you know what kind of data is where?
Yeah.
And most of the answers were no. So it's literally like imagine flying an airplane with no dials. Like you have no metrics to understand whether you're running low on gas, is the temperature heating up? And imagine flying an airplane and that's what most organizations feel like, is you're managing vast volumes of data distributed and you have no idea how secure it is, who can get access to it. Is it ransomware protected? Is it old? Is somebody creating a lot of data? And I think that's really the first challenge, right? Is how do you start building these metrics? And once you have these metrics, you can decide where to start putting your data. Right? And it's not just about data aging, right? I mean, we've always heard that, hey, something gets more than 3 years old. Yes, there's a high chance it's not needed anymore, but there is a high chance that it is also now needed, right? I mean, we know, an old clip, and we give this example all the time, is 30 years old now becomes a hot commodity, right? Yeah. And the other thing also to point out is that when we look at economical storage, it is not just about tiering old data. It's also about protection, right? So as soon as a piece of data comes in, I want to put it on a piece of storage which is read-only protected, which is locked down, which is air-gapped, which doesn't allow access to the rest of the network because I don't want ransomware to hit it, right? Yeah. So I would say the secondary tier is not just about tiering, it's about backup, it's about protection, it's about disaster recovery, right? And I think, we need, as I said, the right metrics to be able to identify what's going on and then to be able to replicate this content to this secondary economical tier of storage.
You see that need even just walking physically around a lot of these shops. I mean, yeah. Walking through some of the internet content shops that we work with, it's dashboards on the walls.
Yeah, exactly.
There's dashboards on the walls, there's click rates, there's access rates, there's error rates, things light up. I mean, it's like looking at, pictures of NORAD in the 80s and the 90s.
It's funny you said that because analytics has embedded itself pretty well in a lot of other, IT, marketing, web server management kind of areas. But when you look at data and storage, I mean, we got no analytics, we got no metrics. And that's probably one of the biggest expenses in a media organization. And we have no idea what's going on with it. And that's kind of scary. So
I think kind of what's driving a lot of the next generation of tools and access and what customers are interested in there is just, being able to see what they have and where they have it. It sounds silly, but that's like, your dashboard. Those are your speedometers and your tachometers. That's how you manage it. I mean, it may only have been in the past one number or one or two classes of data in 4 places, but when it's 25 classes of data in 25 different places, and any of them can be a disaster.
And what's
you need to be able to see what's going on at a glance.
Yeah, and if you look at something like AWS, right, just S3 alone has 7, maybe more, storage classes under S3. Yeah. Like, how do you know where your data is? Because there's a 20, maybe a 25x difference between S3 frequent access and S3 glacial
Mm-hmm.
mode. Like, how are you making those decisions, right? Just on age? I mean, something's got to change. So,
Well, and when your instruments get a software upgrade, and the output doubles, triples, goes up 10 times in size, how long does it take you to notice that?
yeah, exactly.
I mean, you're sitting there on the other side of some genome scanners,
Yeah.
and you have a storage target. How long does it take you to notice that
Yeah.
the software upgrade pushed different storage requirements?
Yeah, no,
I
absolutely.
mean, we've seen that take down systems in the field years ago.
So what are your recommendations out there for noticing this and for monitoring this and for watching this today, watching out for all the different character and variables that you both just mentioned? Like what's available today, and where do both of you think it's going tomorrow?
TC.
We're obviously making our own attempts at addressing this issue. We're not the only ones. There are many organizations that are. I would say, from a perspective of providing direction to the community in general, I think what's more important is to awaken to the fact that you need these metrics in your organization across your data, right? It doesn't have to be us providing it, but you've got to figure out, hey, what's going on with my data? Where is it? How much am I spending on it? Who's creating it? Who's deleting it? Is my data ransomware protected? Do I have 2 copies? I may have an SLA or a mandate from executive to say you should always have the 3-to-1 policy of your data. But are you on a day-to-day basis? What percentage of the data in an organization is 3-to-1 protected? I'm sure that's a very tough question to answer, right? But at the same time, it's a very essential question to answer. How do you put a mandate but have no way to measure it, right?
So define 3-to-1 for the viewers out there who may not know what it is.
Cool. So, I mean, the 3-to-1 is kind of the holy grail of data protection, right? 3 copies of your data, 2 copies that you want to have on 2 pieces of storage, and then 1 you got to have on a 3rd disaster recovery protected storage, which just means at another location. So, simplifying it, 3 copies, 2 can be in-house, 1 has to be somewhere where it can tolerate a site disaster. So that's 3-to-1. Am I right? Maybe,
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. Because I was going to ask, I mean, I'm not sure we want to talk about it now, but I was going to ask at the closing of this broadcast whether you think there needs to be a change to the 3-to-1 rule, which is why it's interesting that you brought it up. I guess we can answer that right now. I mean, Ryan, we'll jump back in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely there needs to be a change. I don't think of it as a need for 2 copies at all. I think of it as, at a minimum, you need to be able to survive double hardware failure. Just planning for 1 failure at a time is silly. I mean, failures are correlated often, and then even if they're not correlated, they're going to overlap. It always makes me laugh when someone describes the origin of an issue as a perfect storm, and then the perfect storm they describe as more than 2 things went wrong. They should be planning for that. And so, if it's all about us, if I think about replication, I can also think about, erasure-coded object storage for very large collections. That means, segments and planning enough segments with enough parity. You can configure 3 reps or 3 parity segments or 4 parity segments, so you can withstand, triple drive failures or 4 servers going down. You can dial in the protection that you want at the site. And then, total agreement, you need a valid copy somewhere else, because we say Katrina as a hurricane reference in the central United States, but it can be a lot of things scarier than Katrina, right? That can take your data offline. So I think the have your data somewhere else is great, and I think more than two planning for more than 2 failures at the primary sites needed.
The one thing I'm going to add is, newer forms of disasters are making their way. Look at coronavirus, right?
Yeah.
We may be living in a world where, hey, we want a globally accessible copy of my data. So I want a 3-2-1-1, right? Where if something goes wrong, I need everybody to be able to access their data from their home, right? So what does that look like? Because disasters are taking different flavors, right? And I think looking at all those aspects. And the good part is the answers are there, right? I mean, there are ways to now create global copies of your content, which is great. But I think this has to be part of every conversation of every organization, especially the enterprise ones, right? That have volumes, vast volumes of data, and frankly, a social obligation to protect that kind of volume of data, right?
And getting back to what we were talking about before, that gives even more dimensions that you need to be able to visualize in your monitoring.
Correct.
And be aware of. And one of the ways that we have made that possible is by leveraging other projects and open source projects, so that people can do things like put together their own ops dashboards on things like Grafana, on the Elastic Stack. Leverage other tools and other systems. The days there, it wasn't too long ago that you would ask for some kind of a report, and then it would be, this business objects extravaganza waiting for some new report or something to come out. But people need to be looking for tools that allow them to fill their own need and react very quickly to their own situations. They can't just be waiting on the next report or the next dashboard all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah, like you guys said, I mean, those technologies are here today, they're available. It kind of leads into the next question is, what sort of recommendations would you give to someone that's looking into maybe they're running out of primary storage space, or they finally hit that wall, or they finally got the request and they felt the need to have their data accessible. They just can't get it from LTO anymore. So how should someone start? Like where do they start? What recommendations would you give them for looking at the data and then looking at the storage?
Well, I mean, I would say that if you're looking at, let's take the scenario, right? Running out of primary storage, what do I do with it, right? I mean, yes, I have an archival copy on LTO, but I want an accessible copy, right? That's kind of where the thought process starts for an end user. And generally, the immediate answer ends up being, okay, I'll just buy more commodity, lower cost file system storage, right? I'll put that on-prem and I'll just start dumping to that. And that's reasonable, right? But what we've seen very often is, you hit half a petabyte, you hit a petabyte of that, and now that file system starts to become slightly unmanageable, right? And you are now dealing with the issues of, okay, if I have a single drive failure, double drive failure with RAID, I pretty much lost my data. So you're starting to get in a scenario where, okay, file systems are good, but it's a interim solution. It's not the final answer, right? And that's kind of where we are seeing where object is starting to become interesting, right? Global access, Reed-Solomon encoding, erasure coding, can tolerate and recover from large drive failures very, very quickly. Geo-distributed data storage, and these are all terms, right, that start adding, to what we mentioned, right? Is it 3-to-1 protected? Can you get a global copy of your data? And we're seeing the interest in both on-prem and so private and public cloud, right? So I would say that, looking at object, may that be on-prem, may that be public, may that be S3, may that be Azure, may that be Caringo, right? But object, according to us, is something that definitely starts to play a role in every organization, right? Not just for tiering, but for backup, for protection, for global access, for security, for access rights, right? The kind of access rights you can have on object, you can enforce that on file systems, right? So we're saying that, definitely that's something that people should be looking at, either pay as you go in the cloud or, buy CapEx upfront on-prem. So I would say that's definitely a direction I would say users need to be looking at going forward, in addition to the tape copy that they're making. So.
Yeah. How about you, Ryan?
And I would say the first advice I would give is get to know your data. I mean, put some real effort into what data do you have, how fast is it growing, and how are your users accessing it. Data lakes are not in fashion right now. That term has been widely disparaged. But it is true, if 90% of the data that is a problem is either less frequently accessed or so consistently accessed, it might be appropriate for putting in something like object storage, putting in something like a data lake, and having a good, robust metadata system and multi-protocol access, so that it doesn't feel like a file system, which is probably fine. It's findable, it's usable, and that might be exactly what you need, and that might be, not only it might be more cost effective, and it also might be better at the same time, because it might have been architected for those use cases. It might have metadata that scales. It may be searchable, and that's the difference between an effective system going forward and something like you were describing, which is, hey, let's throw another half a petabyte of file system at it. That's great, but that's also sort of doubling down and going in the same direction that may already be showing strain.
Yeah, and you mentioned metadata. We can do a whole episode series on
metadata. They're online. You can find them online. Please
exactly. And we're coming up to the end of our broadcast here, but in closing, maybe if you want to share anything that you think we should have discussed that we didn't discuss, and also kind of words of encouragement for people out there getting started with this, because this is a huge issue, right? This is a huge challenge. They're trying to get their arms around it. A lot of the times this data is distributed around the world. So first, just touch upon if we forgot to mention anything, and then kind of close out with a word of encouragement to our viewers.
I think, and I think you've hit a lot of the points. I think in terms of encouragement, I think the best thing I can see when it comes to the end user's perspective is that the ball's in their court, right? Which means they have a lot of choice today, right? It's like being able to select from a whole bunch of car manufacturers. Well, you're now able to select from a whole bunch of storage manufacturers and people willing to store your data, right? All the way from a few cents a month to a few cents a year, right? I think you have the entire variety of it. But I think with great choice comes great responsibility, right? So I think the important part now for the users is to decide, as Ryan was saying, hey, what data do I have, and where do I need to put it, and how do I manage that, right? That's really now the critical, I would say, questions that the end users need to ask. So yes, there's a lot of choice. Yes, you can save a lot of money. Yes, you can make your data more accessible. But that also means you now need to do your homework to be able to exercise those choices. And I think that's where we are going, and we're trying to help users in answering those questions. So.
Yeah, and I think words of encouragement, on a recent webcast, I introduced the idea of keep a beginner's mind when you're looking at these choices. And TC's right, there are very good choices available, open source as well as commercial, but really get in and see what's important. Really get in and analyze them. The conclusions you draw now will be different conclusions than you may have drawn 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 1 year ago. And so if you bring that level of interest, if you bring interest and attention and be thorough in your process, you'll make the right decision for you. And a lot of times another person or organization won't be able to come and tell you that answer, because you know your business and your use case better than anyone else does. So I think that is an encouraging thing. There are many good tools out there, but you're perfectly able to make your own decisions and to attack it with interest.
Great. And as always, our viewers, you can come talk to any one of our organizations. I know TC is ready to answer your questions at StorageDNA, and we're ready to answer your questions here at Caringo. We're also both going to be at an upcoming event, we hope, right? NAB.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. For Caringo, we'll be at booth SL9624. TC, I'm not sure if you know your booth number off the top of your head.
We're in the South Hall, and I think we're a few booths away from you guys. So.
Yeah, StorageDNA. Even if you come to the Caringo booth and ask where StorageDNA is, we'll point you in the right direction.
Thank you.
With that, any closing statements before we end our broadcast here? We'll start with you, Ryan, and then we'll close with TC. So any closing statements?
No, I would just say a little bit back to where I was going. It's all understandable. It's findable. A cost-effective solution is many times very custom. And I think people are in a good position to leverage what's out there. I think they need to bring their own common sense. It's right there for the taking.
Yeah, and TC, you gave a great statement already that should be trademarked. Yeah. I think we're going to trademark it right after this. But do you have another great statement that we could trademark?
Well, let's see. Now, I think we're at a time where users just have all that choice, right? There used to be a time where vendors were in charge and they led the discussion, right? EMC, Dell, HP, IBM. I mean, they led the discussion. Users were guided by what they said would happen with their data and storage. That's not true anymore, right? Users own the discussion. The information's out there. It's a really exciting time to be a user, right? Because there are all these services that you can use. There are all these places you can put your data. And I think, kind of stepping back and making educated choices, well thought through with information, tons of information on the web, is kind of the way to go, right? As I said, it's just that you have more choice, but it's a more intellectual decision that you need to make on what to do with your data. And all the answers are there, frankly. So I would say, it's a good time to be an end user when it comes to storage and data. So
yeah, perfect. I think that's the perfect way to close it. So with that, I'd like to thank you, TC, for joining us today, and you, Ryan. It's always a pleasure to do a webcast with you.
Thank you much. Happy to be here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me, and hopefully we'll do one soon too. So.
Yeah, and that ends our broadcast. Please check the attachments, and if you have any questions, go to storagedna.com or caringo.com. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.